Hello, sports history fans. I'm Harv Aronson from the Total Sports Recall podcast. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first let's dive into today's sponsor just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique, budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched in words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved ones this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for a 15% off at artofwords.com.
We'll go back in time. Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight, we'll explore the world of gridiron greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Sports History Network. And we're live from the Southport, North Carolina home of Gridiron Greats Magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in North America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150 plus years of football history and memorabilia. And you can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. It is at this time I would like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Larger. He hails from Portland, Oregon. Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show this evening.
Bob, great to be on the show again. Great to see you.
It's good seeing you actually live. And I got two things I want to show off before we get started. Number one, I got to stand up to do this.
Oh, attaboy.
Official throwback 19 whatever.
Oh, that was good.
Whatever it was, Bart Starr jersey that I've worn to any Packers game that I've attended in person. I've watched sometimes for games in front of the TV, parties back at the old compound in Wallingford, so on and so forth. And I just said it feels good to wear it and get some use out of it again. And
yeah. Captain, you make that look damn good.
Thanks, Joe. And the second thing for show and tell, I have a 1949 issue of Street and Smith's, which has, in honor of North Carolina, my new home state, Charlie Justice, the great legend, Choo Choo Justice out of North Carolina. And this is a very, very historic magazine.
Yep.
Pick was the sports publication at that time that, for whatever reason, Street and Smiths decided to, instead of calling it Street and Smiths as it did up to roughly 1947, they came out with Pick, and the fall issue of Pick is actually the 1949 edition of Street and Smiths magazine. So again,
by the way, my favorite nickname in the 48 Leaf set, Charlie Choo Choo Justice. Love that card, love that nickname.
And I just love the classic the classic line on the cover of the, the look, the run,
Yeah.
the ball in the hand, so on and so forth. Great piece of football history. Sadly, for whatever reason, football publications are just not in demand. Now, if this was a pristine PSA 10 somebody refractor limited edition 2 out of 3 or whatever, that'd be all over. I have to have it. Name the price. How many thousands? It's fine. But to spend $30 on a 1949 Street Smith, that's a little too much money. I don't want to spend on it. I'll pass on it.
Yep.
That's too much history for me to accept. But in any way, in any shape, it is what it is, and that's it. Joe, I'm going to hand off to you. There's some Brady and 49.
And remember, Bob, remember what your doctor said. Careful of all that arm waving, your blood pressure. I'm going to, in keeping with I saw you wearing the Bart Starr jersey. You showed it off before the show. And a prized possession that I have in my office, surrounded by Red Grange, Jim Thorpe, and Steve Largent memorabilia, is something I won at a charitable auction 2 years ago. And it was a young lady who had cancer, who got cancer, and then she beat it. And Jerry Kramer donated an autographed jersey to be auctioned, and the proceeds went to her. Yep. And I was lucky enough to be the high bidder on our VFC website chat room and win it. And as a thank you, she sent me this, Mackenzie sent me this very nice signed postcard of her wearing it. This sits very prominently in my office. It means a lot to me. Not only is it Jerry Kramer, one of the smartest players to ever lace them up, but just the provenance of it, where it came from. And I have a lot of people who ask me, who's Kramer? This seems a little out of place in your office. And I just tell them to flip that postcard over. That kind of explains it all. So, Bob, I got to ask the question a lot of our watchers, our viewers are wondering. When you wear that Bart Starr jersey into a stadium, whether it's home or away, how many people ask you who's Starr?
Ooh, that's tough. A few people did, believe it or not, at the Meadowlands. I saw the Jets and the Packers play, and I was walking in. I took some razzing at that time from some Jets fans booing me as I walked in.
Yeah.
A couple guys, no lie, we were in the third tier. We were actually closer to the Seagulls than possible.
The Jets.
A guy 2 rows over, young guy he said, who's 15 on the Packers? I don't know who that guy is. And then I had to explain it to him. And I was with 2 big Packer fans. And we're all shaking our heads and wow. And I just said, I just hope we get out of here alive at the end of the game. And it was a typical Packer Jets game. The Packers rolled the Jets. It wasn't even, it was amazing. And then walking out, I distinctly remember 2 guys who had a little too much to drink were really razzing me all the way to the car. Now, I'm not a tall guy. I'm not a big guy. But the guy I was with was like 6'2", 300 pounds. And he just kind of looked at him and just said, guys, just stop messing around. And that's it. And they were,
By the way, Bob, the default Jets fan has had too much to drink, especially after the game. You don't even need to state that. You just say Jets fan, and immediately you're like, okay, guy's drunk.
I'm going to clarify, because there were many nice Jets fans there. They were not inebriated or whatever. But
my wife and I's goal when we got married was to have a picture of us standing in front of every NFL stadium wearing a Steve Largent jersey. We made it through about 6, and then kids started happening, and that kind of puts a block on things. But I've been to a couple of stadiums. The one that really came to mind was Philadelphia. We went there in 2005, December of 2005. And that's the year we went to the Super Bowl the first time. Sean Alexander, Matt Hasselbeck. And I'm walking in, and the fans are chanting, "A-hole, And once one person started, you'd get 1,000 people. I've never had 1,000 people call me a name before, so that was kind of nice. But I always arm myself with knowing more about their team than most of the fans, which is pretty easy. I know, a lot. So people are like, Largent sucks. And I'm like, really? He's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
That's like saying Steve Van Buren sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The Seahawks suck. Well, that's funny. We're beating you. It's 35-7 at halftime. What's that say about your? So I always just kind of try to counter with logic.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll tell you, in Philadelphia, I've heard so many stories from visiting fans that, man, it is hostile.
Oh yeah.
To see a game there, and I thought about it a couple times, like a few times the Packers played in Philadelphia back when I was in Connecticut, and then I just said no. I'm just I want to go to a game. I want to have fun. I'm not there to I'm not on the field playing type of thing. So
yeah,
that's it. One other quick story on this jersey, Soldier Field back in 2012. Jack Adams, Andy Becker, my daughter.
Yeah.
We were able, actually, Andy was able to pull some field passes before the game. Now I got this jersey on, and Bears Packers, pretty good rivalry, so on and so forth. So got to walk off the field, and I'm on the bottom. We're on the bottom, the field, going behind the benches to get out into the exit. And I'm getting booed, I'm getting yelled, so I'm high-fiving people as I'm going along. I got a security guy running at me. He goes, get off the field now, you're gonna get killed. Come on, move. Looking around, and then so a bunch of people were started applauding me when I was going off. I just had a good laugh over that. And that was another game. The Packers rolled the Bears that day, so it was just another amazing experience.
It's a small world, Bob. I went to a Seahawks Bears game with Andy Becker. Stayed at his house. We took a cab in, had lunch with Josh Adams, and then we took a cab, got dropped off about a mile, and Andy and I poured ourselves into a rickshaw and rickshawed up to the front gate of Soldier Stadium. And I've got a great picture standing, outside the stadium with him and I in a rickshaw. I'll share with you. But,
all right, yeah. So Brady and 48 Leafs on the auction.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone was watching Heritage that fired off over the Thanksgiving holiday. There were quite a few 48 Leafs, very high grade. As you know, I've written an article about the card doctoring, how they love the 48 Leaf set just because of the variation in size from 60 to 70 millimeters on high side. And a lot of cards, that were obviously trimmed to me. I have an intimate knowledge of, what these cards should look like, what used to get rejected for being evidence of trim, and what started to, probably 5 years ago, 7 years ago, began to slip by the goalies at PSA and be graded. A 48 Leaf Clyde Bulldog Turner PSA 8 went for $1,400. 10 years ago, that was an $8,000 card. Bobby Lane PSA 8 went for $15,000. That's right in there. That was a good looking card, actually. George McCaffrey PSA 8. Speaking of Bears, sold for $1,800. I mean, that's a $5,000-$6,000 card normally. Bob Waterfield, University of Oregon great, PSA 8, sold for $2,400. That's an $8,000 card 10 years ago. Charlie Trippy, $3,800. The one that got my attention was Slingin' Sammy Bob, Burgundy, PSA 8 Burgundy jersey. PSA 8 Sammy Bob, probably the marquee card in the 48 Leaf set. It went for $11,000. That was probably a $20,000 card a decade ago. And the one surprise was the concrete Charlie Bednarik rookie card, PSA 7, went for $27,000. And I've seen this card before. There's not that many PSA 7s. This is a $7,000 or $8,000 card. So somebody obviously needed that, somebody liked it, but a couple of outliers, but all in all, prices on high grade, PSA 848 leaves were probably a half to 40% off their highs, before, trimming came. And I don't know what to equate that to. Is that saturation of high grade, or is that people being educated about what a trimmed card looks like?
I got a feeling it's a combination of both, but can you imagine spending 25,000 for a card, and now you're going to be lucky you're going to get half, if at most half for that card, knowing that's been doctored type of thing. And again, the 48 leaf, I've said this 100 times, if I said it once, when I was putting that set together, I rarely ever saw any card better than X or X plus or X near mint. There's no possible way those nice cards came into the market all of a sudden out of nowhere. It's impossible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but I will mention a lot of these were the older flips, older grades. So somebody probably paid a lot of money for these, 10, 12 years ago, and decided to get out of collecting, and was probably very unpleasantly surprised at some of the results and prices.
Right. What happened with that Brady?
And both your and I's favorite card. And it takes a second to say it together, and I had to write it down. It is the 2000 playoff contender Tom Brady championship ticket autograph rookie card. Yeah, I'll send you the script later on, Captain. But one of those popped in Heritage, and you and I keep very close eye on those. This is one of 82 examples graded to date. And they grade them on the quality of the card and the quality of the autograph. I'm going to give you a brief history. This card sold for $855,000 over the weekend. That includes the buyer's premium. That's nearly $1 million. This Mint 9, the BGS 9 Auto 10 is the highest graded Tom Brady 2000 playoff contender Tom Brady championship ticket autograph rookie card to sell. I just like saying it at this point. I'm going to give you the history of the three that I've seen fire off. April of 21, a 8.5, a BGS 8.5 and 10 auto sold for $850,000. 2 weeks later, one sold in Leland's for $2.25 million. Lesser grade. The one that was 850 was an 8.5 and 10. The one that sold for triple that was an 8.59 auto. So obviously somebody missed out in April of 21, and 2 weeks later went, I have to have this. Right. $2,252,000 for an 8.5 and 9 auto. So fast forward 2.5 years, this is the first one that's popped since then. This is the highest graded one yet that we've seen, a 9 grade. The other two are 8.5s, and a 10 auto. The 2.25 million one was a 9 auto, and the 850 was a 10 auto. So this one sold for 855. So I mean, you can see the want, the need for this this rare Tom Brady rookie card is is waning.
Well, one quick point on this. We know publicly 3 went to auction. Okay, we know there's got to be a lot of them in hands of private collectors. We don't know of any private transactions because they're not advertised.
Good point.
But let's just call it. It is realistically $1 million card, and it's defining and moving our hobby right now for whatever reason. I know I would do different things with $1 million and not put it in that Brady card. I mean, if I had unlimited income, yeah, I probably would buy it just to say I had it. It's astounding to me that that card is going for that price. It's just amazing, truly amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I save those. I save the prices of them. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating to see that what people are spending on that card. That's gambling. That's like, I assume this is going to go up. People are going to want more of this. But I mean, yeah, it's
unbelievable.
Oh well.
Our special guest is here, and I don't want to keep him waiting any longer. Let me introduce him. His love of playing the game of football led him to officiate it at the high school level when he was in college. He wore the stripes for 27 years on the playing fields of Pennsylvania, and it gave him an appreciation for the rural side of our very complex game. In the early 2000s, he wrote for a couple of officiating websites and was assigned to a history of the rules series. That was it. He was hooked on the history and started the PigskinDispatch.com. It's a website. He lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, and is married with 4 adult children and 3 grandchildren. His day job is the materials manager for a local steel fabrication and machining industrial plant. And I'd like to welcome to our show this evening, Mr. Darin Hayes. Darin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's an honor to be here with you. Nice to see you, Joe, and you, and on here. And I apologize for my camera not working. Having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Not a problem.
You weren't a handsome man, and you're pretty shy, so we're good.
You're getting a better view of the logo than you would be of me, so you won't be as afraid. So that's a good thing.
Hey, that's no problem. That's no problem whatsoever. I'd like to start off by asking you, Darin, how did you get interested in football and officiating?
Well, in Western Pennsylvania, I don't know if you two have ever visited Western Pennsylvania, but it's football is king. You know, all the way from the south part of Western Pennsylvania down by Pittsburgh and Washington, PA, where W&J is, and Pitt, all the way up to Erie. We're up in the stovepipe of Pennsylvania, right up on the lake, and everything revolves around football. It's high school football, it's college football, it's pro football. Erie sits about 100 miles from the Buffalo Bills home stadium, the Pittsburgh Steelers home stadium, Cleveland Browns home stadium. We're about 130 miles from Canton. So, and the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in Hamilton is probably about 130 miles from us. So we have a lot of football in our area, and we love it. And it just, I grew up to it. If I didn't like football, I'd probably be kicked out of my home. So.
Nice. I love your I love your activity on Twitter and other social media. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, you had a post that's very near and dear to my heart that I commented on. November 26, 1925, Red Grange, first NFL game, Chicago Bears versus Chicago Cardinals. It was his first NFL game, ended in a 0-0 tie, but just one of, and you mentioned it as NFL.com ranked it as the 81st greatest game in league history. I would probably rank it higher, considering that was a sold out game, and the week after, against the Giants, Wellington Mara wept, at the gate receipts as it saved his team. How do you decide what kind of to put on your website? How do you figure that out?
Well, we aim to try to have something new and different every single day of the year. I mean, our motto is, there's football history every day of the year, even in the off season. So we celebrate the birthdays of Hall of Famers, of the College Football Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. During season, we can celebrate the greatest games, the NFL choosing its 100 games. And I agree with you. It should be higher than 81st. That was the NFL.com decided that. I mean, really, if you think about it, that game may have saved not only the Giants the week after, it may have saved the National Football League with Red Grange and what he did afterwards with his barnstorming tour and putting football into, across the country. I think that's a humongous day for the NFL. But that's sort of our genre. We're trying to bring football history every single day, bring honor to these players and teams and innovators of the game at all levels of football, not just the professional level. And that was our tribute for that day.
I loved it. I'm not sure if you're a collector, but a program, probably the third I've ever seen, a program for that game sold at auction over the weekend. It went for almost $6,000.
Wow. Yeah, that's I can't say that I'm a collector to the extent that you folks are. I mean, I'm in awe of your conversation here earlier and the stuff that's going there with the cards and the memorabilia. I love listening and watching on the VFC too of all the great stuff that's going on there. I'm more of a collector of stories, and I have some minor things, some signed jerseys and things like that, but not to the extent that you folks have.
Nice.
Darin, I got through recently with your brand new book, which is called The World's Greatest Pro Gridiron Team, the 1903 Franklin All-Star. And it was just an amazing read to me. You sent me a PDF of it. It was an amazing read to me to see what was transpiring at that time historically in football on a team that I basically never heard of before. So let's spend some time looking at that book and what made you write it, so on and so forth.
Well, most certainly. Well, first of all, thank you for reading it and for the kind words. But Franklin, Pennsylvania is probably about 50, 60 miles from my home. It's halfway between Erie and Pittsburgh in that general area. And it is in oil country. And I mean, Drake's Wells, Edwin Drake founded the first commercial oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania, which is a few miles from where Franklin is. But Franklin and another town called Oil City were the benefactors, and they became extremely wealthy just before the turn of the last century. And these millionaires at the time, literally millionaires in 1900 to 1903, when this book took place, decided that they were going to have some competition because the Oil City and Franklin are 9 miles apart. And they ended up playing baseball against each other, and it eventually turned into playing some football, first with some local guys, and eventually they started bringing in some ringers. And this 1903 team, if I talk to people from Franklin, which I work with quite a few, being such close a locale to it, people in Franklin have never heard of the 1903 Franklin All-Stars. They didn't even know they had a professional team in Franklin. And it's amazing, the story. And as I got into it, that was the first draw to it. I saw it in a PFRA Coffin Corner article from the early 80s. I read it a few years ago. Actually, they had a couple of them, and I gained interest because I saw Franklin and being in the locale, it caught my interest. And when I officiated quite a few Oil City Franklin games down there, which is still a big rivalry at the high school level. And as I got more into this story, I said, oh my gosh, this team was amazing. The things that they did to affect our game today. Hopefully I enlightened the reader in the book, and just some of the amazing things they did that season. It's astounding. And I think that the claim that they made that the world's greatest team was from the Franklin paper back in the day. But I think it's very fitting today that I don't know of a more dominant team in any football, let alone professional football, than this team that happened 3 years before the forward pass was even legal. So, just imagine this, a team so dominant that they scored on average 0.97 points per minute. I mean, sit there and think about it. I went back and I looked at, some of the great professional teams. I did an article on Pigskin Dispatch a year or two ago on some of the highest scoring offenses. And those, was the 56 Rams, I think, ended up being the highest. They were like 36 points a game, which you divide that by 120, you're just scoring about a half a point a minute. The Kansas City Chiefs from a few years ago and some of the great teams we've had over the years, they're still right between a half a point and maybe 0.6 points per minute. So they had the forward pass to go with them. So they scored that many points. Defensively, they went undefeated, unscored upon in a 12-game season, 2 of those being what we would call playoff games, postseason games. The second World Series of football played Madison Square Garden against the best teams in pro football at the time. Defensively, They only had 2 teams. Not only nobody scored on them, only 2 teams crossed midfield on them all season, and that was on fumble recoveries by that team, which they got stopped, close to midfield, and they either lost the ball or got sacked back beyond the line. So only 2 plays really went against them on their side of the field all season, 12 games. It's utter dominance, and it's unbelievable. This team with their accomplishments, and and I think they need to be remembered because these players were unbelievable themselves.
Well,
Wow.
the mindset that I could see, and I was just going to bring that up when you said only 2 teams got past midfield, so on and so forth. Can you imagine being a team and you know that you're going to play Franklin next week? How do you prepare for that game? What do you do? What are you attempting to do to, just keep the score at 30 points or 40 points or whatever the case may be? I mean, it's amazing to me how they even played anybody. Why would anybody want to play against them? Because they know they're going to get, squelched by the end of the game.
I mean, that's a great point. And there's some teams that didn't play him. They built this team because of the rivalry with Oil City. In 1902, a year prior, they had a 3-game series with Oil City. And the first game, they end up losing 6-5. But Oil City brought in a couple ringers from the original NFL, if you remember that league of 2 Philadelphia teams and a Pittsburgh team, sort of variations of the baseball team. Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics, Philadelphia Phillies had a team, Pittsburgh Stars. They ended up having Doc Ben Roller, who was probably the best football player at the time on Oil City, and they won 6-5 over Franklin. So they had another game on Thanksgiving Day where it was a 0-0 tie with the same teams. Oil City didn't like that, so they rescheduled a game for the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and the original NFL's championship game, Philadelphia Athletics, Pittsburgh Stars, happened in Pittsburgh on what we call Black Friday. Well, some representatives of Oil City went down there, hired basically the entire Philadelphia Athletics team to come up and play against Franklin. So they had maybe one player that they had on 2 days prior against Franklin, and I think it was 12-0 in that score. So Franklin was kind of mad. They was gambling. These are millionaires betting on this team. So they lost thousands. Franklin did. So one guy in particular, General Charles Miller, who was a big deal in Franklin, he lost the most. He told his manager, he said, "I don't care what it takes. I want a team put together next year that's going to beat Oil City no matter what they do." And that was sort of the evolution of this team was built. So a gentleman by the name Dave Prince, who was a young clothing store proprietor in downtown Franklin, was the manager, and he went around and that whole offseason recruited the best players in football at the time, and they did a pretty good job of putting together a team. And this team is so recognized. As I was finalizing this book, John Wilkie of the PFRA had a Coffin Corner post over the summer, and he ended up looking at some great teams and great players of the turn of the century, right in this era. And for 1903, the first 2 players on his list are quarterback Jack Hayden, Franklin All-Stars, and Herman Kirchhoff, who was a tackle for the. So those are his 2 top players in 1903, both Franklin All-Stars.
Amazing.
Wow.
It's truly amazing. The other thing I did enjoy about the book, and this is just me, I like when I actually can read in depth about the games of the season. And I think you did a really nice job really explaining what happened in each game so that the reader can actually, go back in time, the 120 plus years, to see, and visualize what was going on in the field. And again, anybody who follows early football history realizes the task you created with your book was an enormous amount of research that had to go into it. And can you touch upon, where you found a lot of this information, so on and so forth, and how it gelled together for you?
Sure. I mean, actually, a lot of it came from the Franklin newspaper at the time. Now, this is a day before they had sports pages and sports journalism, but this was such big news, this team and this town of Franklin, they were so ticked off at Oil City that everything that happened with this team from October through December was most of it was front page news. Every game was front page on there, and they went into extreme detail, much more detail than our newspapers do today, because we have video and other sources of media to look at. But this was their only source of getting the news. And the journalists on that, they just did a great job, and they covered it like a news story, which was great for us today because we have so much information on them. The other thing, there's some great resources. I mean, I got to tip my hat to the Venango Historical Society that is in that area. They're actually in downtown Franklin, and they gave me a wealth of information about, you know, General Miller and his partner Joseph Sibley and some of the other characters that are in there. And, you know, others of it was, you know, a lot of PFRA and some other great sources like that had some good stuff on some of the players. And Washington and Jefferson University, who had many of the main players came from that school, they were able to provide me some information, some photos that are in the book as well.
Wow. Now, do you know, not to put you on the spot, but do you know if any, or if they issued an actual program for each game? And did they have a physical ticket? I'm just curious about that.
That I do not know. That's a good question. I could find very little of, you know, there's only one image of the team, and that they had a photographer take a team photo, and that's sort of the cover of the book. And I have the money shot in the book. And, you know, that's the only photo I could find. I found photos of the players, you know, maybe in their college days, or many of these players went on to play when, you know, because this team in essence ended professional football in Pennsylvania, you know, from 1892 with Pudge Heffelfinger and, you know, some of the other great teams that happened. It was all Western Pennsylvania focused right up through 1903 with Franklin. Well, after that, it's sort of poof. There's nothing happening till, you know, you have some Eastern teams, you know, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets and the Pottsville Maroons come up, but not until the Steelers in 1933 is there really anything talked about professional football in Western Pennsylvania. That's because all these players, when Franklin said, we can't do anymore, you know, we went undefeated, we beat everybody, nobody could score on us, nobody could move the ball on us. And what else do we have to prove? Oil City did not play them that year in 1903, by the way. They ended up forfeiting and not playing, and somehow they got their money back. Franklin people were too nice to them. But yeah, when we were talking earlier, teams wouldn't play them. Oil City, the team they built this team for, would not play them, and just because to not face embarrassment. So, but all these players in 1904, you found them on the Canton Bulldogs, the Massillon Tigers, some of those teams. So it ended up turning into the mythical Ohio League with many of those players. You'll see them on those teams.
What an interesting stat. Points per minute. I've never heard it put like that, but it was fascinating. Here you say, you know, 0.97 points per minute. So they're racking up 55 plus, you know, points per game on average. That's really interesting.
Well, it didn't really exactly work like that because timing was different back then. And we get into this. Actually, Timothy P. Brown, you know, VFC member, collector. I know you folks are familiar with him. Footballarchaeology.com. I have him on as a regular guest each week, and I asked him, because you look at these newspaper things, they tell you the time of the halves, and you'll see things like the first half 20 minutes, second half 12 minutes or 15 minutes, and I'm like going, what the heck is going on here? Well, these games, remember that there's no lighted fields at the time. They have 2 or 3 p.m. starts before daylight savings time. So just sit there and think about that this time of year. If you are not in daylight savings time, you're getting dark. So you can't play a full second half, and you're shortening your first half a little bit too, because you know the time constraints. So there's many times they never played a 60-minute game like the NFL does. So they averaged more like it was almost 40 points a game. But I knew exactly how many minutes they played all year, including the 2 games at Madison Square Garden.
Well, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that. Huh.
And I sort of went through, and you look, think of that same year, or maybe it's within a couple of years, they had the point a minute teams of the Michigan. the Wolverines, and they actually only averaged like 0.7 points per minute in reality, even though they called them a point minute teams. And college had a point a minute team. They were like 0.72 points per minute. So I just factored in. I said, I know how much time they played. I know how many points they scored. And I was astounded when I saw how many points they scored before the forward pass. I was floored.
That's just really cool. I love your I love your Pigskin Dispatch podcast you do. They're just little shorts. Most of them are like, you have some 9-minute ones, 18-minute ones, and then every once in a while you have a 55-minute one. My favorite was your number 12. You've done 265 of these, by the way. That's impressive. My favorite was your number 12 that I listened to a couple days ago before the show. The Seahawks get their wings. Obviously, being a Seahawk fan, that one got my attention. How do you decide what your topic is? Why the variation in time between them? And how do you decide that?
Well, actually, you're seeing that episode 265. That's our third season. There's almost 1,500 podcasts in there since 2020. There's 2 more seasons back there. And originally, what I did is I went and I did one every single day, to stay in tune with the daily news, talk about the Hall of Famers that are having birthdays and doing all that. So that's where the first 365 came from. And then I did a series on every jersey number, which you're talking about, the number 12s. We had guests on, and sometimes they get longer. If I have a guest on, an author wants to talk about his book, similar to what we're doing right now, come on, we'll talk about them. Whatever they're talking about, team or player or group of players. And so those generally go a little bit longer, or we're talking about the jersey numbers where we're paying tribute to the great players that wore number 12, or we had one number 15, you're showing off the Bart Starr uniform earlier, Bob was. And, so we got to talk about that. And I have guests on that talked about that. So many of those jersey numbers were guests that came on and spoke. Many people that I'm sure you guys have talked to.
This is, I didn't see on here. I thought this was it. You're saying that, and it's 261. I apologize. You're saying there are other seasons of this, and it's over 1,000. I didn't know that. I don't see. That's fascinating.
Darin is the king of football podcasting, in my opinion. And, I am just still in awe. You did one a day for that couple of years that you did it. Just amazing, amazing. And you're still married, and that's a good thing.
And you're still married. I suppose having a 15-minute one is like, just stepping off to the side and going for it. That's really cool. I dug these. These are just short nibbles, walking the dog, and I listened about probably about 6 or 8 of them before the show after Bob sent the link.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, my wife was very understanding. She knew going in that I was a football fanatic, and so when I got out of officiating, which I was gone like every day of the week during 3 months of the year, getting into this now, I'm doing it 365 days a year. So she understands, and so.
Oh wow, that's great. Darin, the other thing I was going to ask you, can you tell our listeners and viewers how they can obtain your book?
Yes, we are on Amazon. You can either put in the title of it, The World's Greatest Pro Gridiron Team, or my name, Darin L. Hayes, DarinLHayes. And we also have on the front page of pigskindispatch.com, we have a link there that you can go directly to the book, and it's available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. And we're considering maybe going audio too. I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet, but I may be doing that for the audio version of the book as well.
Darin, do you remember those old, Monday Night Football games with Howard Cosell, where he would have a segment on there during commercials called "You Make the Call"?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And they would play. Yeah. If you remember it, I mean, for our listeners, I guess, they'd show some obscure, play where something happened. And it's a weird rule, like the Seahawks Rams one that just happened where you can't punt the ball twice. They're like, you make the call. And then they'd switch over to commercial, and you'd have, 2 minutes to discuss and argue and make your guess about what was going on. It's what got you into officiating? What turned you that way?
Well, the first thing is, the love of football. And I was a starving college student at the time looking for a way to make a couple extra bucks. And one of my friends that was older than me said, "Hey, I'm a football official. If you want to come and hold the chains, we give you like $25 for holding the chains at a high school game." I'm like,
Yeah.
and I get in the game for free and I get to stand on the sideline. Hey, beautiful. So I did that for a couple games. And then up in our area, the chain people go into the locker room with the officials. So you get to hear what they're talking about before the game. They're going over the rules and everything. And it became interesting to me. So I got more intrigued in it. My friend ended up talking me into doing it. So you start out the lower level, little kids games, and you work your way up to, I did a state championship game in Pennsylvania in early 2000s. So, and I was a crew chief for many years too. So till I retired in 2016.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. I like it. So, yeah. How often do you get stumped? Like you see the various, I like now that they have a professional, like, especially for the Sunday night, game and the Monday night game, they'll have a professional. I think his name's like Mike something, who will automatically turn to while the officials are going over stuff before it goes, back to New York or something like that. How often do you get stumped in those?
Well, there's a lot of times, because National Football League rules are different from the NCAA's college rules, and they're different from the National Federation rules, which most states use for high school. So, I mean, there's a lot of different variation into that. And matter of fact, I'm doing some research right now on a story of, the brotherly shove that's so popular with Philadelphia's success, the last couple of years. And, in high school level, that's illegal. It's called aiding the runner, and it's a 5-yard penalty. You can't do it. So I was doing some research, and I said, God, when did this change? So 2005, this changed in the NFL where you could assist the runner. And it was right about the time of the famous college play, with Notre Dame and USC with the Bush push, where I believe Matt Leinart pushed Bush over the ends the goal line for, the USC beat Notre Dame in that game. And so now it's turned into, sort of I think a kind of a dangerous play. I take it back to, the flying wedge and the V formation that they illegalized back in the, early football, because people were getting hurt. And that's really what it is. It's a mass momentum play, without, you don't have the momentum, but you have everybody, 11 players focusing at one point of attack. And I'm wondering, should we be doing this? Should the NFL be allowing this? Because it's kind of dangerous and somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah, at the bottom of the rugby scrum.
What I don't understand about that play is they're so worried about protecting the quarterback. So you can't, defenses are now limited what they can do with the quarterback to bring them down, so on and so forth. But they let like Joe said, a rugby scrum type of play take place, and I can guarantee you, once one star quarterback breaks his leg or something, or gets really injured, that's going to be the end of that. Then the rules, they're going to call for a change in the rules, so on and so forth. So I agree with you, Darin. I really don't understand why they're allowing that play in the NFL of all places.
Yeah, and it's even evolving out beyond the line of scrimmage. I mean, I'm a Steelers fan. I don't know if you saw the game against Cincinnati this weekend. Najee Harris goes into a pile for like a 2-yard gain, and there's a mass pile up there. All of a sudden, he squirts out the other end, gets a 20-yard run. I mean, I was ecstatic that we got a 20-yard run for the way the Steelers offense has been this year. But I'm sitting there thinking, where does this stop? I mean, they're taking away interlock blocking and tandem blocking on kickoffs in the NFL, but yet they're letting mass momentum blocking downfield and pushing from behind.
Yeah.
It's not football, it's rugby, like you said.
Forward progress has been stopped. The whistle should be blown to avoid injury when they hit piles like that. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
Darin, we got about 7 more minutes left, and can you give us a synopsis on your website information and so on and so forth on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's found at pigskindispatch.com. We pride ourselves on every single day. You'll see at least 2, 3, or more stories that pertain to the day, or a podcast pop up, or something relevant to the game of football that's going to be interesting, and most of them pertinent to the day. We have a sister website because our jersey series that we talked about earlier had so much success with the NFL jerseys. People were asking me, hey, why doesn't somebody do this for Major League Baseball or for hockey or the NBA? So we created a website called jerseydispatch.com that sort of focuses on the players and giving attention through their jersey number and paying homage to them in different ways. So we're having some fun with that too. So that's at jerseydispatch.com. But pigskindispatch.com, football focused. We try to keep things football fun. And that's one of the things that just like I'm sure you guys can attest to, your collecting probably takes you back to your childhood when everything associated with football was just fun. Whether it was a football card, opening up that pack of cards when you get them at the stores, almost like unwrapping a gift at Christmas Day every time. You don't know what's going to be in there. Or, playing, electronic games, or just being in a neighborhood, throwing a ball around with the fellas and, having a neighborhood pickup game. But it's all fun. And some of the board games and, the electric footballs and everything that goes on. So that's what takes me back to my childhood. And that's what the intent of Pigskin Dispatch is, and to pay tribute to these great players and innovators and people, anything associated with the game of football. That's why we try to do it on a daily basis to give some entertainment value to it.
Well done. You're following the right people too. You reposted Joe Ziemba and his Bears and Cardinals book, which was outstanding. He was a guest on, and then it's kind of funny. I'm looking at your Twitter account. He reposted that same program from the Thanksgiving Day Bear, Red Grange, first game for the Bears.
I probably reposted Joe's tweet. Joe and I are pretty good friends, and he's been on, a bunch of times. I got to see him at the PFRA conference in Pittsburgh this past year. So, and actually, Joe, speaking of Joe and Timothy Brown, we spoke of earlier, Ken Crippen, who I'm sure you're familiar with, the Football Learning Academy. I had them, we did something a little bit different in the hard copy of the book. And I enjoy ebooks and I read a lot of hard copy books, but I like the elements of ebooks where if there's another part of the story that a reader can go to, maybe, maybe it doesn't pertain to the Franklin 1903 team, but it's something in football that needs to be told so people understand it, like the timing rule that we talked about. So I asked some of my friends like Timothy Brown, I said, hey, can you make a recording on explaining that, why halves were different lengths? We recorded it. I threw a QR code in the hard copy of the books. So a person reading the actual copy of the book can take their smart device, hit on that QR code. It takes them into a podcast. It may be, I refer to the first filmed football game. Thomas Edison filmed the Harvard-Yale game in 1903, which was taking place while this team's playing. I mentioned that and I said, hey, if you want to take a look at that, hit this QR code. It takes you to the YouTube of that Thomas Edison film from 1903. So it's just a different element. I don't know of any other book that's done that with QR codes. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's smarter than me that did it, but it's kind of a neat element and it adds some bonus to the book and the story itself.
That's very smart. I know there's that's very smart. I like that. And are you able to track track those metrics? How many people are taking advantage of that?
It's so far it's been pretty popular. Yeah, most of them tie right into Pigskin Dispatch or a page on Pigskin Dispatch, so I can house the podcast. It's hard for me to put a link unless I do that. But Ken Crippen, his Football Learning Academy podcast, I have that. Joe Ziemba, When Football Was Football podcast. So they each donated their time and did some research on that. So you'll hear their podcast pop up in there, and it's just shortened version. I tried to cut the commercials out of it and all the regular stuff that you hear if you go on to a podcast. So, it's trying to pay for the podcast to come on, but we took some of that stuff out of there, and it really turned out really nice. And very, very proud of that fact too. And I appreciate those gentlemen for helping me because they really added to the story.
Outstanding. So we thank you for your time. We usually end the show asking people what advice you would give to beginning collectors, but you said you don't collect anything. What do you, you're at an advantage. You can see what Bob and I have hanging on our walls and our shelves. What do you have hanging around your office? What do you collect? What do you have?
I mean, a lot of my stuff is Steeler oriented because I'm a Steeler fan at heart. You know, growing up in the '70s, you know, in Western Pennsylvania, you know, it was a perfect time to be a kid. And so I got some great items. This past summer, I got to meet John Kolb at the PFRA convention. So I have a photo of him hanging up, him and I together, and his autograph. I actually got his football card, his rookie card. He signed it. So I have that hanging up. I met Hines Ward this past year, and he took the jersey. I had his jersey on when I met him. I knew he was going to be at this event. He took the jersey right off my back, signed it, and so I was happy with that. And I also got the chance to meet Jerome Bettis this year too, and have a signed autograph from him hanging up. So it's more personal type stuff, but of some great players that I really enjoyed throughout their careers. You know, I've met Jack Lambert, I've met Jack Ham. One I did not get a chance to meet was Franco Harris, and I'm really bummed about that. And I was hoping he might have been at the PFRA conference when it was in Pittsburgh this past year, but his untimely death sort of did that in. But that's one person I regret that I never got to meet.
Oddly enough, Franco was at a golf tournament I was at. And it was just one of those odd coincidences here in Oregon. And I just went up and, man, I'm a huge fan. Just classy. He was so warm, so open. It was really cool. That was about 10 years ago.
Wow, that would be a great experience. You're lucky.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, Darin, we're almost out of time. I really appreciate you coming on to the show and talking about your book and your websites. I do have to thank you for all you do for the hobby and for football history and memorabilia in general. You have it way over me as far as the number of podcasts. I could never do that. Could never keep up with that. I'm lucky I can get 2 out a month. That's basically my limit. But we spend a lot of time on the magazine, obviously, so that kind of eats up a lot of our time. But I appreciate everything you do, and I appreciate you coming on the show tonight and talking.
Well, thank you guys for the invitation. Thanks for the kind words. And some people will call that an illness, what I had doing that many podcasts, and I can't disagree with them. So, but I appreciate you guys having me on and great conversation. So thank you.
All right. We're down to 2 minutes. If you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats Magazine, what are you waiting for? GridironGreatsMagazine.com. Joe, 2-minute warning, handoff to you. What'd you pick up on tonight's show?
If you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats, what are you waiting for? A little panache. Let's do it. What a man. First of all, great guest. Thank you for bringing him on. I've met him through VFC or seen his post, and it's interesting. The normal research you do when a guest comes on, you're like, oh, I know him. Let me do a deep dive and get a little more. And whenever somebody has a podcast or something, I always enjoy listening to that. It's fascinating. There are people out there like you, Bob, who do the heavy lifting for the hobby. Being the publisher of Gridiron Greats is you are literally doing the Lord's work here for the hobby, putting out a fantastic publication that people love. I was just doing my recap, reading these before I put them in my official file, where I categorize them. But just people like Darin who've done. I was stunned at 265 podcasts. I was stunned to learn it was triple that.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of podcasts he does, and the information is just phenomenal. I mean, I literally learn something every day reading his stuff, listening to his podcast, so on and so forth. And yeah. I'm going to do a shameless plug for Sports History Network, the podcast network we're on now. The podcasts on this network are just incredible to me. The information, and even if you like other sports besides football, so on and so forth, there's some great information there. It's truly amazing to me, and it's like a whole new world's opened up as far as football history and memorabilia, in my opinion. All right, we're out of time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back hopefully in another week or two with our next podcast. Take care.
Have you ever noticed that the lower jaw is not protected in sports? Did you know that 10,800 concussions will happen today? This has been an upward trend for the past 50 years. I'm Dr. Michael Hutchison, a practicing neuromuscular dentist. When my son wanted to participate in football and rugby, I was afraid he was going to get a concussion. That fear led me to finding the missing link to reducing concussions. The fact is, the only part of the skull that is not protected in sports is the lower jaw. If you want to drastically reduce concussions, there are 3 basic jaw positions that affect concussions, and 2 of them are not good. The correct one is called physiologic jaw position. It will dissipate the force away from the brain. Knowing that, I designed an appliance that put my son's jaw in the right place, and as a result, he was concussion-free from 5th grade all the way to senior year. This jaw position takes those 10,800 concussions today down to 28. It's the key to concussion protection. As a parent, this is what you need to know. It's extremely important that the device you are using is on the lower jaw. Thickness of the device is important. Most importantly, it must position and hold you in your own unique personal physiologic jaw position. So if your child goes out on the field with the correct jaw position, your son or daughter will not one of those 10,800 concussions today. Get yours today at powerplusmouthguard.com. Use the promo code POWERUP2023 for 10% off.